I'll feed anybody, but I'm not for everybody. My name is Chef Derrick Green, and I find people that have turned their life's experiences into ingredients they use to feed others. We're redefining soul food. These people have turned their adversities into their advantages. This is the Sauce of Life show, and let's go. Ben Lavoie, welcome to the Sauce of Life, brother.
Let's go.
The Sauce of Life is about people that have taken their life's experiences and turned those into ingredients that they now use to feed others. Since our conversation, since we first met, I realized that you're one of those men that are constantly turning your life's experiences into food for others. So with that being said, Ben Lavoie, please introduce yourself to the world.
Derrick Green, what an amazing opportunity. Brother, you and I have gotten to connect. I've gotten to see your heart for service, the impact. You're traveling around the world, and the impact that you're making is an amazing gift to everyone that you touch. So I want to pause and just celebrate the space you're creating with this podcast, to celebrate not just the outcome, but the journey itself. You know, we had a fire pit celebration over the weekend for one of the milestones for one of the men in the group. And one of the guys was telling us a story about Tyler Perry. And he was talking about Tyler Perry was living in a car at one point, wanting to create this business, wanting to create this impact, wanting to uplift communities and inspire people what could be possible in the movie industry. And for years, he's living in a car. And so his actual reality in no way manifested or mirrored to him the greatness he felt inside of him. So that's a little bit my introduction, because in my own journey, I felt this from a young age, Derrick. I had some really good role models. I had uncles that were successful in business, and I saw and I felt like it was possible for me to create such things. And not in a selfish way, but just I felt this hunger, this yearning, and it was always to create good, create positivity in the world. But it was a little bit misguided, misdirected. And so in my 20s, it very much was directed in the way of achievement. And so I thought at the time, the models for success I had was through the game of business. That if you achieved in the game of business, you would achieve everything. You would achieve richness and marriage and fulfillment in relationships. You'd achieve impact, health, satisfaction, all these things in every domain of life. I climbed the corporate ladder. I eventually became president and COO, these kinds of roles in big companies. And that was right when my marriage was falling apart. And that was right when I was having health challenges. And so all this happened at the same time. I had to take on a bunch of credit card debt. And I'm looking around me and I'm like, where did all these friends go? Because we had couples, as a married couple, we had couple friends. And I realized they weren't really meaningful friends for me. They were more her friends. And so in this separation, I lost really a group of friends. I lost also my partner. And I had all these health challenges and credit card debt at the same time. And so for 10 years, I thought I was climbing this ladder of success. And very quickly, I'm talking within a few months, it all came tumbling down. And so my realization, Derrick, at that point was, what can I learn from this experience? What can I learn through this crucible that I can give in service to others and their greatness? Because I quickly found out that if I was just doing it for my own greatness, I go back to when I was a kid even, it would never be enough. When I became captain of my football team in high school, when I played these different activities, president of fraternities, these kinds of things, history clubs, it was always like, what can I do to help others? Because I knew my own motivation was never going to be enough. If I tried to white knuckle my own success, 6 months, I could sustain it, but it would never be enough and energize me, because there's an energy source outside of ourselves that we're only focused on ourselves, we cannot tie into. And so that was my own humbling realization in that journey. And that led me to creating Atlas. Now, Atlas was created about 5 years ago. 10 years ago, when this happened, it was my first foray into self-development, truthfully. So personal development space was quite new for me. And so I'm diving into Tony Robbins. UPW was one of the first events to. I went to Wake Up Warrior, I went to Mankind Project, I went to Sacred Sons. You go through all these groups, faith groups as well. And I was really exploring, like, what is the group that can help me find the answers so that I can live my own greatness and also help others live theirs. And it's funny, it became like a menu, because I saw certain things and certain methodologies and strategies and approaches that worked in different settings, but it never quite fully resonated with me. Well, it wasn't like, okay, this is the school of thought, I'm going to buy a hook, line, and sinker. There was always like something I was like, there's pieces that I don't quite agree with. And so I pieced together over 5 years in these personal development workshops and events and immersions, kind of like a formula, if you will, but really focused on men. Because when I think of not just my own journey, my father, my brother, close men in my life, all of them struggled in the same way. And there was a pattern. And it was a dynamic where, truthfully, Derrick, where the modern world has changed the expectation for men. And yet men don't know what that new blueprint is. I gave the example of my own story. My own story was a career success and achievement would answer all my needs and all my drives as a man. And then as I went to these other groups that were men focused, a lot of them, truthfully, Derek, were one-dimensional and were nostalgic. They were looking back in time, being like, be the Renaissance man from 500-600 years ago, be the knight from 1,000 years ago, be the king from 2,000 years ago, the emperor. And they were going back to these archetypes that were one aspect of a man. And we need to raise up and celebrate that one aspect, but they want the totality of the man and his potential in the modern world. And so again, it was like bits and pieces, but it was like, where's that place that men can tap into all of their potential as masculine beings for greatness in the world? And that led me to 5 years ago, create Atlas. And so I've been on a journey since. I've been married. I have 2 daughters. Business and health is flourishing. But where we are with Atlas is such a beautiful place. And Derek, it's a gift to have you in the group as well, is we're connecting with men that want to be change makers, positive change makers in the world. When you look at the masculine symbol and you see that circle and you see the arrow, that's 2,000 years ago. That's from Greco-Roman wisdom. And sometimes we think, okay, it's a sign on a bathroom. What else does it mean? But if you really dive into it, what it means is, as men, our strength is in our center. It's in our circle. It's inside of ourselves. And the arrow is up to the right. So we're meant to push boundaries and follow one direction for our life. There's a calling, there's a purpose, there's a mission beyond ourselves. And it's up and to the right. And so it's climbing. We were talking about this, the concept of it's an infinite climb. Is that every day you go up to climb, there's going to be valleys, there's going to be boulders, and there's going to be blessings around those boulders. And it's embracing the humanity and the experience of life in a group of men that are also in a brotherhood together. So that's a little my journey, and that's a little what Atlas is about, Derek.
Man, let's go. First of all, brother, I love the energy that you bring into the room. Every room that I've ever been in with you, you come with this level of fire at a minimum, right? So I don't even know what you would look like on some amp juice or something like that, man. Scary thought. And I'm looking forward to the day where you and I actually share a physical stage together and
Absolutely.
really true into pouring into changing people's lives. That's going to happen. Question for you, going back. First, I want to know, I want to go back to your uncle and I want to give them their flowers, or you give them their flowers, right? Because it sounds like, what it sounds like for me is that you've had some successes in life and some fortune in life. You had uncles and people around you that care about your success. You've been at the top. You seem to always rise to the top. The captain of your football team, you said. I believe I heard you say leading fraternities, leading book clubs, leading in football. I already said football, but the companies at COO or CEO level. Given these successes, who are you doing it for? Is it for you personally? Is it for the pleasure of like other men around you? Or is it for like a woman? Who are you doing it for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's both. And I think that's the healthy answer, actually. So it's both for my own calling. I feel my own calling is to do such a path. Now, it's funny, Derek, if we go back 5-10 years and you said, let's go back 10 years. I was CEO, president of a big company, and you said, you're going to one day create a movement for men. I would have laughed you out of the room. So that's how I know it wasn't my idea, because I would have, if it was according to me, what I knew when I was turning 30 years old, I would keep achieving in business. I would create businesses. I would be an executive. I would have an investment portfolio. And that's really what 90% of my life focus would be. But that's what I'm saying. There's something outside of ourselves, whatever the people listening, your belief system is. There's something that's just like, hey, you're on the wrong path and you need to course correct. And so the question becomes, do you listen to that? And so I was a bit of a stubborn learner, to be honest, Derek. I was like divorced. I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was just like, nope, I'm going to keep trying. It was like I would try to achieve something and then it would fall apart. It was like a castle of, I give the example of a castle of sand, and the waves just keep washing it away when you got kids, you know what that's like, right? Yeah. So I was like, why do I build a castle of stone? But it was like, I want to build this castle. And this, again, whatever your belief system is, there was something that kept guiding me. I believe that's God in my own belief system. They kept saying like, that is not the castle you're meant to build. It's not in business. It's not ephemeral. It's not just for this world. And if I'm honest, Derek, I will never forget the moment. It was raining. I was into a train in New York City, and I'm seeing all these men get on the train in their suits heading into Manhattan. And I'm like, they look very happy. They look very successful. And their life looked very simple. And I would talk to some of these guys on the train, just get a sense. They're like, yeah, I played golf this weekend. I made some stock trades. I'm going to retire when I'm like, in a couple of years. I'm like, why can't that be my life? And this is when I was going through divorce and credit card debt, all the things I mentioned. And it's because we're called in different ways. And so you have to appreciate we're all called into a different path and to respect what your path is for you. So your question around kind of where it all started, you mentioned the flowers for my uncle. I do want to give him some flowers because I grew up in an environment that was, I love Ed Milet. Ed Milet has a great podcast, and he talks about, he grew up in middle class to lower middle class, and it was a limited thinking mindset in the home. And it was the same thing. Like, again, great parents. I love my parents. But the reality is it was a lot of fear. It was a lot of limitation. It was a lot of can'ts. And I had an uncle that was educated, had a successful business. And he was like, Ben, you need to go to college. He's like, Ben, you need to add value to the marketplace. You need to have success in your life. And you can have success. And I was like 5, 6. He tells me the story at my wedding. He gave a toast. And he said, I'm just sitting there with my eyes open. And like, I don't even remember this moment, Derrick. I literally don't remember this conversation. But he said, I thought at that moment you were just like absorbing what I was telling you, like at a deeper level. Yeah. And honestly, I think it changed my life, because if I didn't have him as a model of something greater than just limitation and lack and fear in my early formation years, I don't know how I would have been exposed to anything else, because that's all I knew at the time. That's what was all around me. And so that's a great point, just to give that flowers and recognition.
Man, it almost sounds like a rich dad, poor dad type scenario. Although you're talking about a dad and an uncle, rich brother, poor uncle. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that. What defines success for you? Because you mentioned all of these markers that other men may look at as successful things, and yet you realize that was empty. And I'm asking this question from this perspective. Having recently returned from a short stint in Beverly Hills, being invited to parties with billionaires and mentoring groups and all these various things, what I've learned from my time there is that there are a lot of people that have overflowing bank accounts but empty souls. You seem to have realized that the things that you were pursuing weren't what defined success for you. So if you don't mind sharing with me, what exactly does success mean to you?
No, I love it, Derrick. What a great question. What a great story, man. I'd love to learn more about that story too, what that experience was like for you, because there's almost like a tale of two stories here. If I was in my 20s, I would have been in that experience and thought I had arrived. Back to values, back to direction in life. Yeah. So to your point, where am I now? For me, success, I think in terms of centuries, actually. And I think in terms of calling, not in terms of, again, day-to-day tasks, execution. What I mean by that is I feel like what we're doing with men, uplifting men, and then seeing the trickle effect into families and marriages and communities is what I'm called to do. And so the question is, again, do you answer that call? And so that's what I feel like is pursuit of my call as best as I can be, the diligence, the effort that I can apply, the God-given gifts that I have. And again, the daily application and learning to upskill my gifts, because it is a constant sharpening of the sword, as Stephen Covey says. So that's one piece. And truly the quality of the experience of your life, I think, is a big part of it as well. I think instead of feeling like you have to arrive somewhere, the shift in my thinking was really very much about embracing this process. And that sounds so cliche. We all talk about this, but really making it an intentional game where I'm committed, I'm intentional. And so I'm measuring outcomes, but I'm also playing an infinite game. And the way I like to describe that in the group is, if you think of the infinite symbol, right? So we talk about this calling, this thing of, okay, I think in terms of centuries of the kind of impact I want to have. And then inside the infinite symbol is a finite game. And so let me frame that. Let me tee it up a little bit. So when we think about infinite, I think about, again, universe, God, humanity, the world, things outside myself. Because as men, we become hyper-focused on achievement. And that's the finite game, because we want to measure outcomes. Now, in the personal development space, it becomes two schools of thought here. One is just do the infinite game and be this monk, philosopher, right? Or just a finite game and create financial wealth and health for you and maybe your family or something like this. I think it's together, and it's the proper context to put the finite inside the infinite game. So for me, it's about the calling first, following the calling, and then creating measurable progress and outcome towards those things that you are trying to create in life. So it comes down for me, connection, creation, and contribution. So it's really a 3C approach for me, and just knowing that I did my best. So I don't think it's as simple as, I hear you and I have talked about this too, of, people sometimes think like, just be happy no matter what you're doing. I actually don't agree. And I give the example of, I have met many men that feel like they're in labor pain. And I give the example, we are all called to create in the image of a creator. And so the next question is, if women are giving birth, what are men giving birth to? And oftentimes it's an idea, it's a business, it's a concept, it's something. It could be for a family, whatever that thing is that men also give birth. And I do believe, having now worked with men, entrepreneurs, men go through labor pains. And what I mean by that is men go through this unsettled feeling when they feel like they're supposed to give birth or create something and they haven't yet created it. And there's this angst to it, and it's an unsettled feeling. They're like, oh, I'm getting pains in my stomach. I mean, it's not exactly the same, But the idea is that's an okay feeling. It's okay to also have challenging emotions and feelings and experience in your life. And so this is the duality of life that allows us to fully experience the beauty of life. And I think, to your point, in that setting, there's no reason why you can't enjoy the setting you just mentioned, Derrick, because I also think that's a bit of like the cynicism of like criticism. So enjoy it, be present, enjoy the beauty of it. But I do think we can oftentimes almost avoid the discomfort or run from these more challenging experiences and emotions in life. And that really robs us of the growth, robs us of, again, taking things to that next level.
Man, listen, the mindset. I hope somebody is paying attention here to the amount of wisdom and the jewels that you drop. With that being said, like this paradigm that you've developed, and obviously you've been working on this thing, I want to clarify something. I'm not knocking any of those people that I've visited their homes. In fact, if any of you are watching this show, I appreciate very much that I was invited into those spaces and exposed to those things, and I'm looking forward to coming back. I'm not knocking billionaires or anything. I'm actually partnering with one of them in a different space, so not knocking them. What I am calling to observation, though, is that there are so many people out there that spent so much time focused on the accomplishment of a specific task, a mission, raising X number of dollars, getting to a certain level of success, having X number of cars, getting a certain girl, or things like this. And then they hit that milestone and they realize that that's not what drives them or what will bring them fulfillment. And so that's what I really, really wanted to emphasize. And that, one of the things that I love about you and our first conversation together, is I realized that I am a person that has found my purpose in life, and I get to live my dream on a daily basis. This right here, pouring into others, is my dream. Helping others expand their vision of life is what I'm called to do, right? Find their purpose. I found my purpose. It's Stephen Covey's 8th habit. Find your voice and help others find theirs. I just swapped that out with purpose. Found my purpose, and now I help others find their purpose. What you're talking about, this birthing, these birthing pains. First, I need to tell you that there will be so many, I believe, women that listen to things like this, and it's just another conversation between men, and they're and I've been around that type of mentality before. It's like other men just talking about their successes, whatever. But you know what you're talking about with birthing pains, there will be those that say, men have no idea what the hell that means. But you know what? These ideas that are inside of us, and those of us that have the courage to actually pursue those ideas, it will be more painful than birth.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back to ancient texts, and it's not just in Christianity, in different religions, and it's called to create in the image of a creator, it says everyone is called to create. And so all called to create. And the process of creation involves a giving birth, and it can be a painful, uncomfortable process. It's actually a universal principle.
Yep. Man, in this process of becoming who you are today, because Ben, you weren't, I don't know if you feel that you were born with this mentality, or this is something that was fostered by the others around you, as you've mentioned before. How did you develop this paradigm that you have now, where you understand this journey of expansion in alignment with the universe is where you're supposed to be?
Wow, good question. Do you mind if I also tie to the previous point? I wrote down a few notes as you were talking.
Please go ahead.
Dropping such energetic wisdom, man. I love it. So 3 points, and then I'll answer your question. One, dopamine. It was a study done with mice that found that most of the dopamine, the motivation chemicals, are released in the journey, not when you get the cheese. What that means is you have to create the ritual to enjoy it. Now, I say this, back to how did I become here? Because I was addicted to dopamine. I was drinking a lot. I was, partying. I was doing things that were dopamine heavy. And so it was tough for me to not chase dopamine. And so for me, I had to chase intense experiences. So if I didn't have something that was very intense and more intense the next time, I would always be in this discouragement, disappointment state. And so I had to learn to detoxify, truthfully, from dopamine addiction. And then again, find the expression of it in a daily journey. So every day I'm celebrating wins and reflections. And maybe today, that big breakthrough didn't happen, but I'm going to celebrate the progress. I'm going to celebrate that, I showed up and I worked up. I made a call. I called someone and let them know I love them. These things, still celebrating, the celebration ritual. I always position it with an atlas that actually celebration is a more powerful ritual than appreciation. Because in our culture, we always talk about attitude of gratitude. Now, gratitude, I've seen so many people and men, they got a notebook out and they write down, I'm grateful for 50 things on a piece of paper, and they feel no emotion from it. Try to celebrate and not feel a different emotion. It's a higher emotional vibration. When you're celebrating, you're dancing, you're moving, you're higher energy, you're higher passion, enthusiasm, you're inspired. And so naturally, appreciation is a higher vibration celebration is a higher vibration than appreciation. There we go. And so that's a big thing around dopamine I just want to share. One other thing I found is I didn't know my nature. So you said it exactly right. So there's two things you talked about how this started. This started for me, again, initially to solve my own problems. I have to be full like I was like, okay, I'm divorced, I'm in credit card debt. How do I get out of this valley? How do I climb out of it? So that's my first initial focus. And then quickly, my motivation was like I mentioned, I was hitting walls. I was like, okay, I had this awareness, and I would argue it was kind of divine guidance because I didn't seek this, but I was given this awareness of, hey, this isn't just for me. As I talk to my dad, the same patterns are coming up. My brother, other men I love in my life, it's the same patterns. They don't connect. They don't feel connected to the purpose. They don't really know what their gifts are. And they go through their whole life and they feel like this. We did a study on LinkedIn and we found 72% of the men that we polled, and it was a couple thousand people, have no idea. Professional men, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, literally have no idea what their purpose is. And so they go through life. You talk about what you're doing, Derrick. That it is work divine. It needs to happen, what you're doing. Atlas needs to happen, because reality is men go through life and they don't know what it is. So they compare, they compete, right? They do all these things instead of following their calling. And as a result, they're going to be very unfulfilled. They're going to be isolated. They're going to be frustrated. It's a formula that it's mathematical. They're going to be isolated, frustrated, unfulfilled. It's inevitably going to lead to that. And so we advocate in Atlas there is a better way. You can still create the success. That's what Atlas is a bit different. And again, I'm going to tie back to your answer, is because we don't just say, yeah, just become like this like fulfilled monk, philosopher, and don't worry about your bills. Don't worry about being a present father, a great husband, a great lover. Like, the reality is men still want this. They want both. And so how do you integrate? And that's what I was saying. It's really that infinite and finite approach where it's like you have to tie into the infinite piece first, and then you're playing finite games within that. And really it's about gamifying your life. So that's one thing. And the last piece I want to say, you talked about kind of how it became. So it started with myself, again, to solve practical need. I started seeing other men in my life. I became aware of it. And I only became aware of it, again, as I sit here today, because I was finally humble enough to see it. It wasn't like my father, my brother just started struggling the day I got divorced. I was blind to it. I was literally blind to seeing inside of the men around me. And so I was in competition. I was in like projecting. We talk about masks in Atlas. I was wearing a lot of masks. I was trying to project status maybe, or strength, or these things that really I didn't feel I had, but I was trying to make sure no one saw that I didn't have them. And so that was kind of how it started. And it very quickly became about other men. And the other men has just become such a gift. I mean, Derrick, I've seen men take their marriages from dysfunctional to exceptional. I've seen men grow their businesses. And so it's not this dichotomy of I can either have fulfillment and joy or business success and health and all the lifestyle things that I want. You can't have both. And like I said, I haven't seen a men's group that's integrated that. And that's why after joining these other men, I joined all the men's group plus many more in the personal development groups I mentioned. I didn't find an approach that really clarified men's nature. Now, let me dive to the nature part of it, if I may, Derrick. So in my own journey, because I projected so much, I became associated with the mask I was wearing. It was like the mask was right in front of me, and I was associated with the status and the role and the things I was doing, not who I was, less so the being, more so the doing. And so in my own experience, I didn't know who I was, but it was bigger than that. All these other men I knew didn't know who they were. And so how could they mentor to me? I went to priests, they weren't clear really on who they were outside of their role. And so I was like, okay, who can do this? Well, apparently this is my calling, is to figure this out and to dive into it, because the gifts that will flourish from that, the fruit will bear fruit for other people. And so what we found is there's 6 core masculine drives. If you go back throughout antiquity to the modern day, there's 6 drives that men have. And so men need to understand they have a masculine nature. And what's amazing is what I've never seen connected is I started studying male neuroscience. So there's books on female, but there's also books on male neuroscience. I haven't met a single person that's read any of these books. It's almost like they're anathema, Derrick. I was like, don't read the male neuroscience books. I read them and I dove into it. I was like, what are the differences with the male brain? And the books are eye-opening. because they talked about from the womb into childhood, how testosterone, how we focus, our visual acuity, how we envision things is different than female. Like all these things, you see how they're different, and they create these patterns, and they create gifts. And they're very clear. We're not saying one gift, one journey, one calling is better or worse than another. What we're saying is also to appreciate and to accept the truth of whatever your gifts are as an individual, man or woman, or whatever you are on your calling. And so what we found is, first of all, you need to know what your nature is. Like, what is your nature? And so many men simply don't know their nature. They don't know these drives. And I'm going to give you one practical example. Freedom is a drive for men. And so in my own journey, I stepped out of marriage. I did things that I was like, okay, I get divorced. I was drinking a lot. I was partying. I was like, what was I seeking? Well, I was seeking freedom. I was seeking freedom from problems. I was seeking for freedom from truth. I was seeking freedom from intimacy. And so I had the drive, and the drive doesn't go away. That's what we want to create awareness on. The drive doesn't go in. The drive is actually a force for your masculine genius, your masculine greatness, if you listen to this. But the key is to fuel and focus it the right way. And so many men, frankly, don't even know where to start because they don't even know what the drives are. They don't know they have a drive for freedom. They go fishing, they play golf, and they're like, I'm playing golf by myself, I'm fishing by myself. I just enjoy fishing. Do you enjoy fishing that much? Maybe you do, but maybe you're also meeting a need for freedom and for space in your life. And so it's understanding our drives and how do we meet them in healthy, sustainable ways that are authentic to our gifts. The other piece on me, and Derrick, I know I'm being long-winded here, but just another point, is I have never seen, because again, as men, we associate with what we do, what we're creating, what thing we're working on. And so I have never seen a framework that explains, like, what are your gifts irrespective of what you're doing. And in my own study, what I found, I have a mentor who's a monk. I have a mentor who's, from different domains of life, is that it really comes down to spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical gifts. And so we all have some combination of these 4 types of gifts. And in Atlas, what we did is we built like a survey, essentially. So you can clarify, okay, what are my spiritual gifts? What are my intellectual? What are my physical and emotional gifts? And they're different by it's like a cocktail. So Derrick Green is a different cocktail than Ben Lavoie, then whoever's watching it, you're a different cocktail. You're going to be a different mix of these different gifts. And then industries, businesses, jobs are going to require a different combination of these gifts. I've never seen that done, but it's getting to the core of what is your nature as a man with these 6 drives, getting to the core of what are your giftedness, what's your giftedness, and then how to focus as a man. Because I gave the example, 72%, 1,000 men of just a small sample size have said, I have no idea what my gifts are, what my, again, drives are, and I don't know what my purpose is. And so these men, if we don't do something about this, Derrick, that's the urgency on this call. If we don't do something about this today, these men will go to their grave and never give their gifts and never create the impact and follow their true purpose. And that is an absolute tragedy.
I wholly agree. When I'm mentoring people, I often say that, and I'm sure this is not an original thought in any capacity, but your greatest life lies at the intersection of your talent and your passion. And as I listen to you talk, your passion, just first of all, your passion comes from you. You're very good at talking and showing up with energetic, but I would think that your passion is enlightenment in the capacity of this. As I keep hearing you reference being a monk, a monk is a title or a destination. It's a label, it's a profession almost, whereas enlightenment is the journey. And it seems that you are very talented at becoming aware, on this path of enlightenment. So for you to have taken your skills, like taking your passion and intersect that with your talent now to help men, it's like a bullseye, man, that you can apply to the mindset, and you're targeting the mind of men. But not just that, you talk about men and you keep mentioning men, but for the women that listen to this, because over the historical journey of my businesses, I've always had at least 80% of my customers as women. So I'm just letting you know that. But there are a lot of women that are trying to understand the psyche of men, or trying to understand how to be a better partner for their man. Anyway, bro, I just want to give you your flowers right there with that. Understanding, for people that are listening to this, I want you to perhaps go back and listen to Ben speak again. And what you can understand is he's not on a journey to become a monk, or he's not headed towards a destination of becoming a monk. He's on this journey of enlightenment. And so even the fact that you have this awareness, it sounds like this is something that you've had since you were a young man, this awareness. You woke up one day, so to speak, to say, hey, there are these patterns that are happening. That's an awareness, a recognition that there are these patterns. Where does that come from? That awareness, or that even that desire to be aware, where does that come from?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 2 points, if I may. One, my wife is actually creating a similar group for women. And so Atlas is about creating purpose for men and giftedness, like we said, because that is the epidemic. We call it the mendemic. But on the women's side, women don't feel empowered. And so actually we have to address both. And we talk about rising together. And this concept of men and women, it's not about either or, less, more, scarcity. It's about rising together. And that's how you really change families, communities in the world. So I just want to make that point of Atlas as part of a bigger ecosystem and a bigger mission, actually. In terms of awareness, truthfully, it started for me with curiosity. So from a young age, I was highly curious, but the question became where I focused that curiosity. So I was highly curious. That was the keystone habit, as you would call it. But I focused it mostly on learning and mastering academics and then business in the first, really 30 years of my life. And so that obviously got dividends and payback from that. And then I kept going back to that because it was so comfortable. And then it was divorce, drinking too much. It was all these, I kept hitting my wall. I was a bit of a thick learner in that way. Yeah. Because they're going back to, okay, well, it's back to working out and business. And I would, again, have relationships keep falling apart. And okay, at some point I need to get the message. I need to be curious about myself and about life and about God and about bigger questions. And so it wasn't like I was seeking that curiosity of those more challenging things. It was that my life came to a valley and I kept hitting a wall, my head against a figurative wall until I was like, okay, I have to, that curiosity that I put outside of me for so long, redirecting inside of me. And in doing that, exploring, we call it the inner kingdom, but not just for myself again, because you can get lost in your inner kingdom, truthfully. You get lost in your emotions and things that happen in your past. You can spend years talking to counselors. The shift was, it wasn't just about getting lost and exploring. It was about understanding to help others. And that's what became, again, very quickly like, okay, I've learned this insight. Every day I'm learning new insight about myself, about other people, about life, about God, about the nature of things, nature of the world. How do I share this? How do I distill this in a way to impact people as powerfully as is practical?
Man, full of it, brother. You're just full. Listen, you just said something I'm just like, he gets it. The battle is inside. The battle is internal. You've said it numerous times. This is why the Atlas symbol is a circle. This is why the symbol of a man is also a circle. That, like, the struggle, and I tell people this all the time, the battle is in your mind. There's no greater battle you'll ever face than what's happening in here, controlling your thoughts. It's like Wayne Dyer says, control your thoughts, control your life. Think and Grow Rich. All the books that I've read, Ben, all of them. Even though I have a book here by a friend of mine, Maria Baltazzi, I'm reading. It's called Take a Shot at Happiness. And I'm listening to it, and I'm reading it, and it's just one more book that just confirms you're the sum total of your thoughts. So why not learn to actually go in and be comfortable controlling or getting to know your thoughts, getting to know yourself, because this is where it is. So anyway, you just said something that was very powerful. You said that you can actually get lost within yourself. And you mentioned many people spend years in therapy. In my arena, I see people that become conference junkies, where they're constantly going to seminars and self-help workshops or mastermind groups, but they never actually, it's like they don't grasp that you need to sit and truly understand what's happening in you, inside of you. What are your thoughts on that? I believe, let me say this. I always will say, after 21 years of military service, that a person that's lost is simply ignorant to understanding where they are. That's what lost means. You just don't know where you are or how to get out of it. But wherever you're lost at, someone else is excited to get you out of that place. You know what I mean? You can be lost at sea. There's a Coast Guard helicopter waiting for someone to call in to be rescued from the middle of the ocean. How did you deal with or overcome this thing of feeling lost, or not even falling into that trap of getting lost within yourself?
Great question, man. You asked great questions there. A couple things come to mind. One is back to calling. You have to have something greater than yourself, because when you focus on yourself, it will never be enough motivation. I keep going back to that because it's true. I have tested it empirically in my life, and I've seen many men test it. Selfishness will you'll be kind of half in life. And so we talk about the man in the arena, the Teddy Roosevelt quote, which I love. It's all about getting every moment to moment, every day, getting fully into the arena of life and that thing that's in front of you. And we have a tendency to want to pull back. And so that's the human piece. So that's what I'm saying. We get lost in ourselves is we withdraw from life. And when you withdraw from life, again, you're not just doing a disservice to yourself, you're doing a disservice to others. You know, I love the metaphor. I've heard this from Darren Hardy. I want to make sure I recognize my own mentors in life. Darren Hardy's been one of mine. I love his trainings. And he talks about with gold, specifically with petroleum, the philosophy of as you drill, 10, 20, 100 drill holes, you find oil. And then what happens is you need to go deep. And this is what people make the mistake is they think it's one or the other. They think I'm just going to take a little bite from all these different schools of thought. I'm not going to go deep. When I give the example of those 5 years, Derek, I went through Tony Robbins' entire training program, his master's university. I went through all his weekend immersions, right? As an example, I went through, I gave the example of Dispenza, right? It wasn't like I just said, okay, let me take a little bit of Tony Robbins. And now I'm a master on Tony Robbins. Let me take a little bit of this other personal development. It's like, no, I wanted to go, when I found gold, I was like, okay, let me really explore this. Let me go deep. And what I found is, okay, now there's things that still feel like if I want to just focus on men, it might be a little different. Great stuff that I learned from all those mentors though, but what can you take from them, right? So I think people forget that. And so what happens today, especially in this dopamine-riddled culture that I talked about, is men, especially because our brain, back to neuroscience, is wired for dopamine. The part of our brain that reinforces dopamine, for example, is larger in a male brain than in a female brain. What that means is that's why we like video games are very tough for us to pull away from, right? And so as a result, we like consume a YouTube video. It's heavy hit. It's like conceptual at a very high level. And that's like, we go to the next video. But that's what I challenge men that are watching this, to your point, Derek, and women that know men, is that how do you encourage people to go deeper, to find a school of thought, a belief system, a faith system, something that they can go deep into once they feel like they found some gold? Because that's when we really can extract the gold and not just think about it knowledge-wise, because we have a lot of people that have knowledge, but to your point, have wisdom. And by wisdom, it means it's part of who I am. Like, I don't have to think about showing up to this podcast differently than I show up to being a father right when I get off of this with my 2 daughters. I'm just me. Right. And the reason why that is because exactly, it's about going deep, getting that gold, and letting that gold infuse through your body so your body becomes gold, and then you reflect light in every interaction you have. So this is where the mistake, I think, is happening in the current personal development space, truthfully, Derek. So it's an amazing question. The other point I was going to make, I wrote down some points, because you had such a great question.
Go for it, brother.
Just remember, you're not alone. So in Atlas, we talk about this concept of a team sport. Men are much more likely to commit suicide, being anxious. And over 30, less than half of men have close friends. And it's not that they don't need friends. We all need friends. If you look at the Blue Zone study that was done, the biggest thing was connection. So when we have close connection, not just women, but men, we live longer. We live healthier. We live more fulfilled. We actually do better in business. We have greater success, right? All these things. But as men, we isolate. So that's the challenge we have, is like men have this lone wolf psychology. And I think it's cultural. Truthfully, it gets reinforced in culture a lot in certain domains of business and sports. And what happens is, again, inevitably isolation, frustration, unfulfillment. I use the quote of a lone wolf will always lose out to the pack. So which one do you want to do? Do you want to be by yourself, alone, frustrated all the time and unfulfilled? Or do you want a team of other people that are helping you elevate your game constantly? I don't know about you, but I would pick the latter. And I have picked the latter. And I know you have as well, Derek. The other piece, you talk about books, man. There are 2 books, amazing. One's Michael Singer, one's Letting Go. And of course, there's spiritual text, but I won't get into that for the sake of the conversation today. But Letting Go is an unbelievable book.
Letting Go.
Yeah, it's by David Hawkins. It actually isn't that well known of a book. But if you go into it, it changed my life. And then I had Natalia, I read it. She changed my life, and she refers books that to me that changed my life. This book goes into a depth of understanding of your emotional system, the nervous system, how emotions and you experience them, and what to do about it. Because this is the frustration piece. I mentioned people getting lost. Is okay, you're telling me that emotions is part of the 4 gifts. And that means I got to experience my emotions. Well, man, I don't want to, right? So, okay, so I'm going to sit with my emotions. The first time I sit down, it feels extremely uncomfortable because anger comes up. I feel maybe self-loathing towards myself. I feel guilt. I feel shame. All these things come up. Fear comes up, anxiety. And I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't do it. But what happens after that is as you let emotions flow, and that's what the book talks about, letting go, you don't attach with them. You see yourself as the emotions and thoughts are actually in front of you, and you experience them and let them go. That strategy and that approach will not just change your life, but change everyone else's lives around you. Because now you're going to show up from an emotional energy that is contagious. And it doesn't happen like this. In fact, the reality is it is a practice. But that's just Surrender Experiment, Michael Singer, Letting Go, David Hawkins, 2 incredible books on that content that you talked about. And again, because if you don't have some kind of mentorship, you can get lost. And that's why the reason why I give those 2 authors, Derrick, is because as men, back to not feeling alone, we can feel like I'm the first person that's ever sat down with myself and feel guilt, shame, fear, and anger. Right. Men can actually say this. I've heard them say this. I'm the first person that feels like this, that feels like this. I did this. You don't know what I did. But I've been in a workshop with 10,000 people, Derrick. And we had them close their eyes and raise their hand if they felt this, this, and this, and this. And guess what happened? Every single one of them raised their hands. So part of Atlas, part of the power of a community of this, is just acknowledging that what you're going through is a human experience. And to give yourself grace and forgiveness and acceptance and stop judging yourself. Stop feeling like you have to compete against other men and be further along than you are. Because that, again, is a recipe to isolation, frustration, unfulfillment. And so just acknowledging, wow, everyone feels these things is one of the biggest breakthroughs men can have, actually.
Man, that's again, when people become focused on a specific goal, a specific destination, and then you're comparing yourself with others. Just like you always use the analogy of running a marathon. It's like there's only going to be one winner in this marathon. But did you have a chance to actually observe any of this scenery as you were running? Did you have a chance to appreciate what was happening in your body as you were running and all these things? Man, Ben, I'm grateful for this conversation. Listen, you talked about transmutation earlier, right? I want you to dive into that a little bit. You didn't use that specific word, but I pick it up from Napoleon Hill, right? He talks about sexual transmutation, but it doesn't have to apply necessarily just to sex. You talk about that, and then also success leaves clues. I'm a big believer in that. Success leaves clues. You've left a lot of clues in here, and you, like me, I have a notebook down here that I'm just writing notes and flipping through stuff as you're talking, and then to hear that you're writing notes over here. Success leaves clues. So for people that are struggling with things, that's one of the clues right there of, hey, I have a thought. Let me honor that thought by writing it down so that I can come back to it, because otherwise that thought will disappear. You may never get it again. Anyway, back to transmutation, brother.
So it's a big topic. I love the word of transmutation. I love the word of alchemic consciousness. So this idea of converting lead to gold. Now, if you can convert, obviously when you go to the Middle Ages, you look at lead being converted to gold, the mythology around it, this idea of the gold was always inside the lead. What I mean by that is it's the concept of the acorn seed. The acorn has the ability to grow an oak tree. The seed has the ability to grow the plant that grows the fruit that you're looking to create in your life. And so I love the metaphor of shifting from hunting to farming. And that sounds like a subtle shift, but it's quite profound. When I hunt, I'm a man of achievement. I'm a man in motion. I'm a man who needs to make things happen myself. And so it's about, I'm going to hunt. I'm going to throw the spear. Funny enough, quick side story. They found out with woolly mammoths, there's this egoic thing where men are like, yeah, one Neanderthal man threw a spear and killed, a 4,500 pound woolly mammoth. Now they're finding that's impossible. It would have been like a little pin. And actually what they did is as a team, they used a longer spear and they put it against a rock and they got the woolly mammoth to charge around a corner, and that's how they ran into it. And so just that like a metaphor, and the fact of okay, we always thought it was one guy alone throwing a spear, killing the woolly mammoth for the tribe. Actually, it was a tribe coordinating, men and women, using a longer spear and using the woolly mammoth's momentum against itself. Right? So to your point. So back to alchemic consciousness. So this idea of the seed, the ability of the oak tree is already in the acorn. Right? And so the question becomes, I love the metaphor of watering and weeding, right? Shifting out of hunting, I do it all myself. And shifting to this, really it's an abundance perspective of everyone has a growth impulse inside of them. My job is not to push them, is not to hunt it out of them, is not to make it do it myself. I have to get the business outcome myself. Again, shifting to farming, what that means is if you are in fact called to do what you're called to do, Derrick. So I think of this podcast and the business you're creating. Think of Atlas. I think of many of the men in the community. If you feel like you have an inner knowing, this is what you're called to do, then it's going to be there. The reality is the path is already clear for you. And now it's about how do I water and weed it? Because the thing has that, whatever that thing is, that business, that idea, that concept that you're giving birth to, think of it as a human life. You give birth to kids, right? The kids are going to grow. You don't need to make them grow. Did you tell your kids, hey, you got to go 6 inches next year, right? And you mean every day you're pushing them, No, They have it inside of them. And so it's true of life. Life has a growth and decay cycle. And so how can you create the soil, plant things in the soil, and then water and weed it? Now, water and weed are juxtaposed opposites. So watering, it sounds great, right? Because I pour water on the seed, let's say, and the tree grows, right? So I'm adding. It's a game of addition. Weeding, not as sexy. Weeding is subtracting. And so in life, the reality is you need both. Just think of plants. You need both. And I think of the sun in this case as focus. So when we focus on something, whatever we focus on grows. And so you're watering, weeding, you're putting your focus on it. And so some of this is a game of addition, to your point in alchemic consciousness, right? Which is, okay, I need to add things. I need to add things to my skill set. I need to add things to my character. And some of it is subtraction. And again, it's this game of, in our culture and in YouTube and in, these YouTube videos, these things that just kind of quickly grab your attention, and it's like sugar, is they never explain the reality. You have to integrate both. They say, just water. Water is absolutely the secret. You'll get it. Just keep water. Or just keep weeding. Just keep, right? The reality is both. So water, we talk about water, what that means. In weeding, it's about working on the inner game. That's what we've talked a lot about in this call. And so men pulling lies out of their life, right? There's lies, there's incongruencies, there's pretensions, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to do the character building. So I think of like the Stoic philosophers. I think of, you go back to Benjamin Franklin, some of these guys, they're talking hundreds of years ago about character. Character was one of the most common words in the English language if you go back a couple hundred years, Derek. Now it's hardly ever used. But that shows the shift in our culture, because we're about identity and status. We're not about men building inner characters and those becoming the test of time. But who do you celebrate? I position, and this is what I position to men, back to alchemic consciousness, the fruit, the gold you will create, again, not the sand, the stone, the gold. It's going to be a different model than for the most part, exists in the world today. And I do believe this. And what that means is men, because we want to be remembered, we want to have a legacy, we want to have an impact, is you say, I'm going to shoot for the models that exist. They're mostly business professionals or athletes or actors. And so you're like, I'm going to shoot for that. I think the future, you'll be evaluated for the kind of man you were. The being and not just the doing. And so what's going to happen, we see it even. Like today, we evaluate the robber barons from 100 years ago completely different than how they were seen in their own time. And so if you go a century, if you go into the future, the reality is, as men, we're going to be evaluated for who we are as men, our character, how we show up, how service, how much love we have in our lives, how much love we give, not just what we create. And so if you're a man listening, you're like, I'm just going to keep being one-dimensional, you will be forgotten. And that's a brutal truth. And I'm saying it, and I know it actually makes most people say, but history will forget you. History will forget the business you created, because what will actually be remembered is the type of man you were.
I agree with you wholly and fully. Absolutely. Man, that time flew by, Ben. Dude, you absolutely are one of those people that I have to have back. I just want to hit on one thing, and then there's two questions to wrap this thing up. Mm-hmm. To summarize everything you just said, I wholly believe in this statement that I believe it was Wallace Wattles and The Science of Getting Rich, that says that everything and everyone prospers me. There are so many people that are so stuck in their world believing that things are happening to them and not realizing that things are happening for them. And if you can just shift that and search for the lessons as you have searched for the lessons, and that has brought you an awareness and enlightenment, things are happening for you. All of the things, even the bad things, they're happening for you on this journey of becoming. With that, brother, where can people contact you and how can people join Atlas? Who are you seeking?
I love it. Our website is legendarymen.com, and it's not just for men. So the group is for men. But again, if you're a woman watching, whoever you're watching it, you know men that are seeking purpose, are seeking a life mode, service, integrity, all the things we talked about in this call, please have them go to the website. Again, they can jump on a call with me or the other coaches. They can come do a test drive and explore the community. And we welcome everyone. It's a very inclusive group. For everyone. We have guys in over 11 countries right now. And the movement just keeps growing because it needs to grow. The reality is, again, the men around the world need this kind of movement to be successful. So it's legendarymen.com.
Legendarymen.com. Okay. Are you any socials like
Yeah, so it's Become Legendary. So it's Become Legendary podcast at YouTube. And then it's Become Atlas, Become Legendary on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then Ben Lavoie, if you and I never spoke again, if this was the last conversation we ever had, or for our audience, if this is the one time they'll get to hear you speak, what is it that you want them to walk away with?
Geez, that's a big question. A lot of pressure there. I think, again, back to what I was saying in that last point, that's what I would say. History will remember you for the kind of man you became. That's why we talk about becoming. You said it there, a verb, become. It wasn't achieved a bunch of business success and retired and played golf and that was it. You are called to continuously become legendary. It's a process. It's an evolutionary alchemic process. And so in that, I would say is just really your fruits. If you want to build castles of stone that last centuries and not castles of sand that wash away with the first wave, it's about integrity, it's about service, and it's about purpose. And so there's so many talking heads in the world today, and that many of them will not tell you that. But again, Derrick, you and I believe this, we live this. If you want to live a life to actually be remembered, to actually uplift your family, to intergenerationally change how your family for generations to come experiences life, that's where it starts. It starts with mastering your inner world, living with integrity and service and purpose, and then creating the practice and the power of uplifting others. And in doing that, you're going to change the world. Everyone, as I said, has gifts. You have unique gifts. You have unique calling. And a lot of it is just being in a group of men that think like this and that can mirror to you, because sometimes we don't see it ourselves, and mirror to you, hey, listen, I see a gift in you. You might not even see it yourself, Derrick. Hey, Ben, I see a gift in you. And being in that kind of energy is transformational, because we go throughout our lives and no one tells us. I was at a wedding, and at the wedding ceremony, they were toasting, and they really got into this kind of experience where they were sharing like what they loved about the person, their gift, the impact they've had. And someone grabbed me up and said, I know so many people that have gone through their entire life and never had that experience for them. They've never had it. They've just had like birthdays and little celebrations and retirement parties. They're like, I don't really know ever what my gifts were, what my calling was. My life really mattered. And that is the question that haunts us men. Did my life matter? And your life will matter. Your life already matters, but your life will matter intergenerations for centuries to come when, again, you really take that inner game approach seriously that we're talking about on this call, Derrick. It's a call. It's a challenging call, but it's a call to live life on a different level, a different dimension than what a lot of modern society is calling it to do today. So, Derrick, just in closing too, I want to celebrate you, man. Mirror the gifts. You're super motivating. It's always been an inspiring interaction every time we chat. And let's just hope that, again, as we have these conversations, as you continue to do what you're doing, continue to do what we're doing in Atlas, we can reach more people, and more people are inspired to connect to their true calling and purpose. And that's what this is about.
Beautiful, brother. The world. This has been Ben Lavoie. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Cheers.